Hey, what's up guys? My name is Mr. Adazahi, and today I'm going to be doing a review on the Leech. The Leech is one of the many war robots and war robots. It's a relatively new one, and if you haven't heard of it, well, are you living under a rock? Anyway, the Leech is extremely powerful. As you can see, it holds 4 medium weapons, which is probably one of the most powerful weapon combinations you can get on the game, and also have a robot with reasonable amounts of mobility. This weapon combo is shared with the Spectre and the Dock. However, the Dock can only use 2 at once, which requires different kinds of strategies than the Leech and the Spectre. However, as great as all those weapons are, that's not really the main focus of the Leech. The Leech has this ability called Repulse, which basically puts this little sucky suck beam on your robot and activates 90% damage reduction. Any damage that you do to the Leech is basically reflected to you. You only do 10% damage, whereas the Leech will reflect 35% of that damage back to you. So, essentially, when you're shooting a Leech, you're doing more harm than you are doing good, except for in some circumstances that I'll go into detail with later. When you're playing the Leech, there's a wide variety of good setups you can use, with some of them including the Scourge, Corona, and Storm. There are other weapons you could run on the Leech, but these are generally some of the most powerful ones. Some budget builds are usually going to be the Storm. However, you can also use Punishers or Orkans, Tolumbuses, or Tyrans. Now, when playing the Leech, there's a specific module that is actually an absolute must to use, and you already know it. It's phase shift. The Leech makes excellent use of phase shift in ways that many other bots can't, except it kind of sucks in this regard. It's not bad, it's just a really bad meta design, but really good economically for Pixonic, because this makes it so that the meta is essentially to spam using the power cells of the phase shift ability. But most people don't really have this many power cells and this many leeches, because most higher rank players will run 4 leeches and a phantom or something like that. I do think that this meta will eventually fall, but Leech will more than likely still hold prevalence, and using phase shift on it will still be pretty powerful. However, as it stands, phase shift and Leech is essentially an easy, quick way to not die for 45 seconds. But you need one other module other than phase shift to actually successfully do this. And you probably also know what this one is. You guessed it, Last Stand. Last Stand is basically what's going to be carrying your Leech alongside this phase shift. Using these 2 modules together will allow you to jump into the enemy spawn and wreak havoc and basically claim a beacon for your own and turn the tides of the game alone. And I don't really think that this is a great meta. I don't want to make this entire video bashing the whole meta, and I do know that this meta will most likely not last forever. Pixonic is noticing that this is pretty crazy, hopefully. But do keep in mind that this is one of the best ways to run a Leech, and that makes it so that if you're mostly a free-to-play player, you're going to have difficulty because the Leech is very reliant on using power cells. However, there actually is something that will help us free-to-play players slash dolphins slash whatevers. And that is the quartermaster pilot skill. You see, there's also a pilot skill called Foolhardy Quartermaster, which is essentially going to allow you to use phase shift again. But if you just use Quartermaster like I do, it will reduce the cost of the phase shift by 10 power cells, which might not sound like all that much, but actually kind of is. Currently, I have 50,000 power cells. If we divide this by 40, you see you only get 1,250 uses. However, with the Quartermaster skill, you get 1,666, which gives you a whole 416 extra phase shifts if you have a similar amount of power cells. If you consider that using Foolhardy Quartermaster makes you use power cells about twice as much, you see that it tends to get pretty expensive when you don't use Quartermaster and you also use Foolhardy Quartermaster instead. However, in its essential playstyle, where you wouldn't be using all these power cells and all that, if we considered that we just have a Leech without a phase shift, if they decided to get rid of that in Last Stand, Leech actually isn't all that bad. Now, don't kill me yet. You see, the thing that Leech has is that unlike an Ares, while it doesn't use an actual shield, and Ares' shield can be broken through with modules, Leech can be locked down while it is in its ability. Of course, most leeches will run anti-control, but if you can get through that anti-control and then lock them down, when their ability ends, they're going to be in a pretty bad predicament without phase shift. So I think a pretty great way that Pixonic could easily nerf this is by either just getting rid of phase shift or getting rid of Foolhardy Quartermaster for the Leech at least. This could even be integrated into the lore, saying that the creators of the Leech, which are Evo Life, have some sort of grudge with the creators of Phase Shift, which are Icarus Technologies, and then they don't make their things compatible with each other. Similarly, things that are made by Evo Life would not be compatible with the Phantom, which is made by Icarus Technologies. There isn't much lore into War Robots, but with the little that we have, I do think it would be very fun to actually put things into the game that have to do with that. But I would like to give you guys a little bit of a better perspective of the Leech from the eyes of somebody who isn't an extreme pay-to-win player. You see, most of us little free-to-play Dolphin whatevers don't really have all of this top-tier Leech stuff, so we can't play it how it was meant to be. In fact, really, even if we got lucky with Ares or something, or Spectre, we'd be basically set. But seeing how the Leech is played, even if you get a Leech, that's not really enough to just dominate everything. You also need a Last Stand that's maxed out, you need Foolhardy Quartermaster, and you need Phase Shift. So things get expensive even if you do win a Leech. Like me, luckily I was able to win a Leech from a giveaway that I participated in. And some players have been able to win Leeches from Sinister chests or win enough components between the Sinister chests and the Yandi chest. There's also other giveaways that other players have won and competitions players have entered to try to win a Leech. So, if you find yourself being one of these lucky players, and you're wondering, how am I supposed to play the Leech without paying all this absurd prices to use it? Well, I'll give you a little idea of what you could do. Aside from what I was just talking about with the whole Quartermaster pilot skill, there's a couple other things you could run. One important thing to keep in mind is tactics. If you're a player who is not really able to spam phase shifts to get out of sticky situations or wait until your ability is up, well, you can't be playing like you see most of these top tier YouTubers and stuff playing. They really won't show you any good insight because what they're doing is, well, the spammy phase shift thing. For you, you're going to want to stick right next to cover. I would personally recommend putting an anti-control if you have one on your Leech. I managed to win one from the Freedom chests back when those were a thing. They were dropping Last Stands and anti-controls, and I won a single anti-control. Personally, I use it on my Phantom, but sometimes I'll switch it over to my Leech. It works pretty well, because if you get locked down, you'll still be able to get to cover. Even if you don't have an anti-control, you can still use the phase shift with the Quartermaster skill like I talked about to get you out of sticky situations. But do remember, this will only work for you once, and then you'll have to bear the 40-second wait time. Even if you get to half health or in a bad place, you won't be able to get another one just like you would if you had Foolhardy Quartermaster. Additionally, as aggressive as you're able to be, try to make sure to still attack players when their abilities are down, or make sure that they use their ability before you do, with some special exceptions, such as Ao Jun. With Ao Jun, you have an ability that's 2 seconds longer than his, and you generally want to activate your ability on that Ao Jun, so that you'll damage the Ao Jun while it's flying, because your Leech ability will still stick to the Ao Jun still while it's in stealth mode. However, you can't actually Leech it once it's entered stealth mode. But other robots, like Ares, you'll usually want to wait for them to activate their ability, or use your superior firepower to force them to activate their ability first. In that case, you'll still be able to activate your ability on them, and they'll be forced to damage you, or just not damage you to not damage themselves. Another thing you could do against enemies, such as Aojuns, if you're unable to get the leech onto them before they fly up, you want to make sure to at least leech somewhat, because then they'll just gattle at you and they'll be doing 10% damage and you'll get absolutely nothing out of it. So maybe leech one of their teammates, and that will incentivize them not to kill their teammate. Or they're a bad teammate and they'll kill your teammate, and you'll get a free kill. One other extremely important thing, you see, with Areses, when you would get into a little confrontation, there wouldn't really be any purpose whether you shot the shield or didn't shoot the shield back before Shield Breaker was a thing. This was mostly because the shield just did no damage to anything except for powering up the weapons of the other Ares. So you could shoot it if you wanted, but then it would just shoot your shield, which didn't matter, and therefore whether or not you shot didn't really matter at all. However, when you get into a face-off with two leeches, you don't want to be shooting at the leech. If they're shooting at you, it's actually good for you. You see, remember what I talked about the percentages. You block 90% of damage. Therefore, any damage that you take is only 10% of the damage they shot. But then, the damage that you repulse is 35%. So if you're firing, you're taking more damage than you're dealing. But if you don't fire, and they do fire, then they'll be doing more damage to themselves if you're leeching onto them than if you'd be doing to them. It's a bit difficult to understand, but basically, if you leech onto a leech and they leech onto you and you start shooting each other, don't shoot them. Just let them shoot you and you will end up doing more damage to them. One last little tip I have to share here is you have to always make sure that you're aware of your surroundings when you're in the leech. Remember, when you don't have your ability or your phase shift is loading or you're not using a phase shift, you're very vulnerable. The leech has a pretty measly amount of health when it's not using its ability, so you need to always know what's around you. Be constantly moving the screen around to make sure that no enemies have snuck up on you. Things like Lokis would do a lot of damage to you if they catch you off guard, because they can sneak around and you won't actually be able to see them unless you look in their direction, in which case that stealth icon will pop up. But if you're not looking at them, they could sneak around, get behind you, and, well, do a lot of burst damage. Anyway, that's my review slash rant slash whatever slash help guide on the leech. I'm a badly drawn, terrible graphics octopus named Mr. Adazahi. Thank you for watching my video. Like, subscribe, do all that, whatever.